In this video, we're going to particularly talk about backing up your ratchet and primitive slackline systems. And there's a couple different methods that we can use to back up either the ratchet or the primitive system. And I'm just going to talk about the differences between the two, even though we've already kind of touched on them in the previous videos. So backing up the primitive tensioning system is fairly easy. All you need is enough tail on either end of the system to be able to wrap it around the tree and then tie the webbing back onto itself. And the easiest way to tie it onto itself is to use a Bowline knot. And I highly suggest you learn how to tie that knot because it is super applicable as you progress into slacklining and more advanced rigging practices. So bowlines, figure eights, fisherman knots, those are all recommended knots that you should learn. And again, the bowline is probably the most important for backing up the tails of your primitive systems. When we get into ratchet systems, and especially once we start moving beyond the beginner level to more intermediate levels, we might want to start doing some bounces and some tricks and stuff that might generate a little bit higher load than what a basic slackline system would typically have. So we talked about backing up ratchet systems, primarily just taking the tail end of the webbing, like the primitive, wrapping it around the tree and then tying a bowline. A secondary backup for the ratchet itself can also be used. So to do that, we simply take the ratchet as it's hanging. And let's see if I can demonstrate it here. And there's the part where the actual webbing is attached to a bolt. This is where the sling is. What we can do is we can take a secondary piece of rope and thread it through or behind this bolt and wrap it around the tree and make a sufficiently strong knot, like a double fisherman's knot, to create a continuous loop. So what that will do is, in the event of a failure within the system, it will keep the ratchet itself from flying, towards a slackline or anybody that might be standing around. So it's important to back up the webbing, but when you start, hands down all the time, but when you start getting into more dynamic tricks or when you're generating more force on the line, then it's a good idea to use a separate rope or a separate piece of webbing to tie the backup through the ratchet. And always make sure that your ratchets are locked, oriented properly, and are sufficiently strong enough to take the loads that you're generating. All right, this is another style of ratchet used for trick lining. You can tell it's quite a bit bigger than the basic system, and this one is the type that you definitely want to back up because this is the type that you're going to be doing bigger tricks on and generating a lot more tension with. Okay, so I think that's it for backups. So now we're going to move on to tree protection and some other tips and tricks for park practices.